Hey, this is Jeff Matson of Dark Star Orchestra, and you're listening to Richard Solomon on WCWP 88.1 FM.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Taking Care of Business. I am your host, Richard Solomon, and today we are going to be going on the Endless Tour project with Joanna Colangelo, and we actually have a very special co-host. We have Robert Grayson, who hails from Australia, but is calling in from the great state of Florida. And then we have Joanna, who's calling in from where?
Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Wow. So this is like truly a national show. So for those who don't know, Joanna's doing something incredibly cool. I was listening to a program on the radio called Tales from the Golden Road, which is hosted by Gary Lambert and David Gans. And they do a really great show on sort of the Grateful Dead and the Grateful Dead tour and the music. And it's just a great, great show. They do great stuff. And I listened to the show. And if you don't have satellite, you can actually catch it on the internet. There's a website where you can catch all of their shows on this like FTP site that's pretty cool. And one of the guests on the show, so I'm giving you a little bit of the research of how we find guests here. One of the guests was Joanna, and I caught a piece of what they were talking about, and I caught the website that they were using in their discussion, which was endlesstourproject.com. Immediately, I get on the internet, I put in the search bar, endlesstourproject.com, and I see this incredible idea, which is that Joanna is going to go on tour with the Grateful Dead, retracing their 1995 tour, city by city, date by date. And, of course, that's a very pivotal year because that's the year that we lost Jerry Garcia. And when I heard that and I saw all this great information, I'm like, I got to get Joanna on. I got to get her on as a guest, even if we have to, like, maybe drive to Albuquerque and maybe kidnap her for a couple of hours. So, Joanna, thank you for being here. Robert, thank you for calling in and being a part of the show. So I got to ask, so Joanna, how did this whole thing start? I mean, it was real. This is just an incredible concept. What was the bolt of lightning? I guess you had the kite out there at the in the lightning storm. What was that? You know, the kite and the lightning storm with the little key at the end of the string moment.
Well, you know, that's a good question, and I could go back many, many, many years and say that the concept has been probably in my mind since I was a really little kid, although it more recently kind of came to be. But, you know, I first came to the Grateful Dead when I was very young. I was 6 years old, and for my 7th birthday, I got a couple of Dead albums, cassette tapes at the time, and it was American Beauty and Shakedown Street. Because I heard Ripple on the radio in New York on WNEW, rest in peace NEW, and Scott Muni was playing it, and I just, you know, I just fell in love with it, and you know, thank God my parents saw that in me and went ahead and got me those albums.
Were your parents appreciative of the Grateful Dead music?
Very much so, and encouraging me and my brother to really enjoy the music as well. But they weren't. We grew up in a very, very musical household. A lot of classic rock. At the time was rock, I guess.
Yeah, when it was rock. Yeah, exactly. When it had roll. When it had roll.
Exactly. A whole lot of Bob Dylan. A lot of Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Some of the old Al Cooper stuff. You know, some obscure songs, obscure musicians, and then, of course, you know, the greats of Simon and Garfunkel and the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and all those good folks. The Grateful Dead actually wasn't a huge presence at that time, and then once, as I got older and got really more into the albums, then it became a very big thing in our family, and we would listen to them all the time whenever we were in the car. Whenever I was around, it got a little bit much. We had to put me on a time, you know, on a time frame on how long we could listen to the Grateful Dead when I was in the car. So, you know, by the time I got a little older, and I was probably 10, 11, and was going to, my parents took me and my friends, my brother, to our first concert. That's when I decided I wanted to go on the road with the Grateful Dead. I wanted to do a tour. And for me, it was after college. That was going to be my gift to myself. Or I was going to take a summer and go out on the road. And, of course, that never happened. Jerry Garcia died in 1995. I was 15. I had just turned 15. And that was that. So, that's sort of the backstory to it all. And then the more immediate impetus for the project was that I had written a column on the Grateful Dead for the Huffington Post this past summer in June. And it was a real kind of spontaneous column. I was sitting outside, and I happened to be listening to So Many Roads from the final show in Chicago. And I just wrote this very nostalgic piece on really missing the Grateful Dead in those early days of summer, because that was when, we'd be getting all excited to go to a giant stadium, and the tours were starting, and it was school was ending. It was a really fun time, and I just missed that. And I wrote the piece, and it was so warmly received, and got a lot of emails from folks saying, this was my first experience with the Dead, or this is what I missed the most about them. These were my concert experiences. And then from that, it all kind of unfolded sort of beautifully, and I thought, oh, wait, what if I did, what if I could go on the road with them one time in maybe an unconventional way, but what if I retraced that tour that I never got to go on, and met with folks who were on it, and put together this tapestry of what it might have been like to finally do that. And so that's how this all came together.
It sounds like you could have talked to the Star Trek people about a script, go back in time, because it's actually very ingenious. And I want to get Robert Grayson into the conversation here. One of the things that's kind of amazing about the Grateful Dead is that there's sort of a multi-dimensional factor to them as a band. They have their music, which is incredible on its own. They have this community of people that is largely unmatched, except for people like, who the Jimmy Buffett fans and some other groups out here and there. But there's nothing really like the Grateful Dead fans. And then there's this whole aura about the way the Grateful Dead conducted themselves. When you think about it, way back when, they used to let people tape their concerts. There were actually tickets for the tapers section. Now, when you think about it, the corporation, bigwigs today would be horrified that, you'd be sitting there with a microphone and taping a live concert. And yet the Dead encouraged it, and it seemed to have absolutely no impact, no negative impact on their popularity, on their sales. And the other thing that was really great about the Grateful Dead is, if you ever noticed, one thing, musically, and my brother will talk about this if we get to have him join us, they tuned. They actually sat there and actually tuned for a long time before they actually opened up. But more important, you never saw the Grateful Dead with someone come out and say, blank corporation proudly sponsors, the Grateful Dead. They were never sponsored by anybody. There was no, big flags or whatever advertisements or poster boards hawking anything. Like, look, even Jimmy Buffett, and I like Jimmy Buffett a lot, but he's got Land Shark Beer and the Margaritaville restaurants and all these other things that he promotes. And there's nothing wrong with it, but the Dead were just purely non-commercial. And I thought that was a great aspect of them. And in many, many ways, what was interesting about them is that made them even more incredibly deep than, most people realize. So Robert, why don't you pick up on that thread? You were a big fan of the Dead, and you're old enough to have been a part of some of the older tour stuff, like myself. Did we lose Robert? Hello? Joanna, you still there?
Hello.
Oh, Robert, yeah.
I'm here.
Okay.
There we are.
I muted my mic. I think one thing that sets the Dead apart from many, many, many other acts is that they really focused on what will make an experience, what will make a real communal thing happen and orchestrated a much more multidimensional experience than the average band on tour. And, kind of like Bill Graham looked at concerts that way. So that's what I think is in play there.
Robert, how did you get involved in becoming a fan of the Dead? What was your introduction?
I had, been completely blown away by the Beatles when I was 6. I just, looked at the records as they spun and said, I want to be part of that. And, that's what got me to get involved with playing music. But then I kind of drifted for a while, and around 16, I think I probably experimented with the odd plant, herb, or whatever, and, just said to a friend, take me out and let's, buy, what do I buy? Let me buy some new records. And I bought Mahavishnu Orchestra, Miles Davis, and I think a Grateful Dead record. And the guy said, you don't really get this band from, we'll need to go to a show. Went to a show, and that was the end of that.
Now, where was the show, and what year was this?
Oh, God, I'm not good with years. I think it was probably Jersey City show.
In what decade?
Oh, 75, 76.
Now, what's interesting is I was working in a law firm in Manhattan at the time, and a colleague of mine was a girl named Mary Bigger. And she said to me, oh, aren't you going to see the Dead? And it was sort of like, well, no. It was, I like the music, but it wasn't really on the radar, so to speak. So she gave me a bunch of tapes, and she said, you really got to listen to these guys. And I ended up going to the shows, and then after that, I became, just so enamored with the whole music and the scene and the whole bit. And I ended up seeing them at the Coliseum. And then what's really funny is, as I got older, I was doing a litigation out in California. I was out in San Francisco, and I was staying at a hotel. And what I would actually do, here I am as a New York attorney working in San Francisco on this big litigation as a consultant. And I would call up this company called Express Tickets. I remember this clear as day. They would drop off tickets for it was like a very nominal amount of money. And they would drop off the tickets to the hotel. I would go and get a rental car, go over the Oakland Bay Bridge to the Coliseum, and I remember seeing the Chinese New Year's show, the Mardi Gras show, and a couple other shows out there. And it was really cool to see them out in California. I saw the Jerry Garcia Band on Broadway. I saw Jerry out in California, and that was really just deeply personally rewarding thing to do. Once Jerry passed away, to what extent did both of you follow, the other ones, the Dead and Further and Rat Dog and Phil and Friends and those iterations?
Yeah, I went to a Further show right after. It must have been the next year, or I think as soon as Further went back out on the road, I went to a show. And it was fine. It certainly it still was the same vibe, but it was also really close to when the Grateful Dead had kind of ended, and Jerry Garcia had passed away. And then I waited years. I didn't see any members of the Dead for, it must have been close to 15 years or so. And then my last year, actually, last October, my oldest friend and I were in New York at the same time, and he and I were at our first Dead show together when we were 10, 11, 12, and Phil and Friends were playing at Roseland, and we said, we've got to go, we've just got to do it, and so that was the first time I went back to see a living Grateful Dead member in many, many years, and since then we try to get out and see him or some form of the Grateful Dead today, at least once a year, just for old time's sake, and to enjoy some of the music and to kind of remember what those times were like. And you get a little slice of it for a few hours, which is great.
Hi, this is Richard Solomon. You're listening to Taking Care of Business. We will be right back. We're with Joanna Colangelo on the Endless Tour project. She'll be following the Grateful Dead in 2014. We will be following her, and we hope that you stay right with us. We'll be right back after this. Hi, this is Richard Solomon, taking care of business. Now joined by co-host Paul Solomon, and in Florida, so we're in New York. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, is Joanna Colangelo, who is the coordinator and the inspiration behind the Endless Tour project, endlesstourproject.com. And we have special co-host Robert Grayson in Florida, who hails from New York originally and lives permanently in Australia. So we have both a very national and international show. Joanna is going to be going on tour with the Grateful Dead in 2014, retracing city by city, date by date, the 1995 tour. Let's just talk a little bit about. We're going to jump all over the place because this is that's the way it's improv like the Dead. Let's talk a little bit about the route. Where is it going to start, and how are you going to travel it?
Yeah, well, great questions. The route is about 6 months, and it starts in Salt Lake City on February 19th, and it ends in Chicago on July 9th. It's going to be 21 cities spread out along that time, and some of the cities I'll be in for 3 days at a time, 4 days at a time, and in some cases just in and out in one day. But I am going to try as hard as I can to really stick to the actual dates and locations of that 95 tour. I'll be driving myself. I will try to be doing this as authentically as I would have had I actually been on that tour and been old enough to have traveled on that tour almost 20 years ago now. So I'll be driving. I'll be camping. I'll be camping in the car. I'll be staying with friends. I'll be staying with new friends I meet along the way. And every now and again, I may hop into a hotel when I'm in real need of a shower and a good bed. But yeah, in every place I'll be stopping and interviewing people who were at the shows in that city. And in some cases, someone may have been to a show in Chicago back in 1995, and today they may live in Nebraska. And so I'm very open to be meeting with people all over the country as long as the route takes me there. So folks don't need to actually still be in the same cities that they were in however many years ago. I'm sort of collecting tales from everyone all over the country and very happy to meet with folks all along the way.
Now, when you're at the venue, when you're at the city venue, are you going to be at the forum where they played? Or, like, how are you going to? Where are you going to be physically? And are you going to are you going to put up an inflatable tour bus?
If I were more than a one-person show, it crossed my mind that I could try to get permits for all of the locations and set up shop. But I don't think that's going to be possible for this project. So it's going to be a little bit different based on each city. Just like the Grateful Dead, in some cases I'm just going to have to let it unfold the way it does. But as it's coming together right now, in the way kind of meeting with folks and getting their information online and through email. In some cases I'm meeting with people individually, either in public locations or at their homes. In other instances, people are pulling together groups of friends who were at the shows and hosting sort of dinner parties where 10 people are coming back together, in some cases who haven't seen each other in years. And we're at the show together, and they're, still in touch over Facebook. And they all kind of live generally in the same area. And they're all, meeting at someone's house, and then I'll come, and, it's sort of a big dinner party, and I'll be interviewing everyone, and I'll be filming as well. And in other cases, this is actually very fun, tribute bands, dead tribute bands, have gotten in touch with me and have asked, or invited me, I should say, to attend a concert on whatever night I'll be there, and they'll be replicating that dead set from 1995.
That's awesome.
That's great.
That is just truly awesome.
Yeah.
Just for the people out there who are listening, if I could just interrupt 1 second, and I apologize for that. Just so people who are listening, I'm actually going to give a list of the cities. Now, if you go to endlesstourproject.com, you'll see a link that says The Route. And it's Salt Lake City, Oakland, California, Philadelphia, Charlotte, Atlanta, Memphis, Birmingham, Tampa, Las Vegas, Seattle, Portland, Mountain View, California, Highgate, Vermont, East Rutherford, New Jersey, which we all know as the Meadowlands, Albany, New York, Washington, D.C., Auburn Hills, Michigan, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Noblesville, Indiana, Maryland Heights, Missouri, and Chicago, Illinois. And this is, you'll see all the dates, but it goes from 2/19 of 14 all the way up to July 9th of 14. Now, will you be tempted to, like, when you're in Salt Lake City, maybe, do a little skiing and in Memphis, catch the ribs on Beale Street, or go to Graceland if you're in Memphis?
Yeah, they'll be. I think part of this is too, and I can't remember if I read this interview or if I saw a clip of it on YouTube. But there's an interview where Jerry Garcia actually talked about, what the whole sort of traveling Grateful Dead caravan was, and what was the phenomenon behind it. And that was the question he was asked. And he said, I can't. He said he couldn't make heads or tails of it, and that it wasn't really like him to try to. But one of the things he said, and it really resonated with me, was that the Grateful Dead, was kind of the last quasi-mainstream, and it certainly wasn't mainstream by most standards, but was quasi-mainstream way of going out and traveling America. It was sort of the last circus or the last carnival or the last vaudeville sort of shows. And what happened was you had people who stayed on the road all year for years, and then you may have had people who were, bankers, lawyers in New York or what have you, and took their summers off and went on the road with the Dead. But it was this outlet to go see America in a time when there weren't too many other outlets where you could actually join up with folks and go out and see the country. And I think, after Jerry Garcia passed away and the band stopped touring as it had for 30 years before, we all, obviously the music stopped and, new music stopped, and some of that community may have fallen away, although it's certainly still very strong. But I think one of the things that really was just a real shame was that people don't have the avenues so easily accessible to go out and see America anymore, like they did with the Dead. And so that's another big part of this project, is kind of an American adventure set against the backdrop of the Dead and the Dead community, but it's very much about an American adventure.
Well, what was really interesting about our country back then is that the cities had, like, their own unique characteristics. There were the mom and pop shops and the local diners. There weren't so much of these national chains of things, and there was something unique about, like, when you went to New Orleans, my brother and I would go to Mother's because that was like a great place. When we went to Montreal, you went to Sam the Record Man because that was like the great place to get records.
Or if you went to the Village, you went to Tower Records Outlet, where they had on West 4th Street, where they had all the cutouts.
And that was sort of a unique part of being on the road in America, because you'd get all those little nooks and crannies, and and you say, like, I remember going to a place in Amarillo, Texas called Calico Kitchens. I don't know if it's still around, but it was like tremendous food. It was like truck stop food, and it was great. And I remember their menu said something like, "Mothers and grandmothers, cook from scratch here," and you just don't get that kind of vibe. I remember. Do you guys remember reading things like Dupree's Diamond News being distributed at shows and things like that? And some of the other sort of cultural effects of being at a Dead show.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert, please.
I had a few peeks at it, but I was always more drawn to the people.
Okay. So Joanna, so tell us a little bit about who's going to be helping you on this. I know this is a one-person adventure, but you have a beautiful website. I mean, there's sponsors and things like that. What's a little bit behind the scenes? And while you're on the road, I'm sure there's going to be social media announcements and things like that. So give us a little exploration of that.
Sure, thanks. I mean, I have to owe a lot to a good group of friends who've helped up to this day, and hopefully will continue to help lending their services. The website, as you mentioned, endlesstourproject.com, is up, and a good friend of mine, Anthony Tominelli, is a great illustrator, a terrific artist. There's beautiful illustrations all throughout the website, courtesy of him and his talents. And as for the actual road, I'll be out there solo, although I will have some guests come, I think, from time to time, some guest travelers. But it is privately funded, so it's going to be some corporate sponsors out here in New Mexico. We have a couple of breweries who have very generously offered to do custom Grateful Dead brews, and so a percentage of every brew poured throughout the course of the tour will come back to support the Endless Tour Project. We'll have, I've got some individual donors, just fans, people who I'm meeting along the way. Everyone's welcome to donate. We may have an online campaign in January. So, it's a little bit of everything goes a long way, and that's how it's all happening.
And logistically, who's going to be there, sort of running, who's going to be answering your mail and paying your electric bill, and some of the little subtle things.
It'll go to a post office box, and if the tour dates are almost broken up, because this 95 tour it's really the spring tour and the summer tour. So there are a few pockets where there's about 3 weeks where I won't be on the road, and in those cases I'll be coming back and kind of refreshing and checking all my mail and gathering myself again and doing some work, and so there are breaks here and there, but not too long, and of course we're all, this is all on social media, so once I actually hit the road, you can find Endless Tour Project on Facebook, and there'll be constant updates. And then on the website, there's a blog called Notes from the Promised Land, and that's going to be the title of the book once it's ready to come out. But in the meantime, I'll be updating the blog hopefully every day, every few days, with just the status and where I am and what's going on.
So far, what has been the biggest surprise to you in actually undertaking this adventure?
I don't know if it's a surprise as much as it's a really happy confirmation of what I hoped, which is just how incredibly warm and diverse the Deadhead community still is to this day, and how connected they still are to each other. And I mean, I've had people reach out who are major hedge funds managers, in the Northeast. And I've had people reach out who are organic farmers living way off the grid, in Montana. And it just speaks to, and it's sort of everyone in between, that's the spectrum. And it just speaks to how pervasive the Grateful Dead is, and sort of the values and philosophies, and how deep that community still runs after all these years. So it's a surprise, but also a really nice thing to see, that's still very strong today.
Now, in terms of the Grateful Dead cover bands that you talked about, you want to share with us any of the bands or some of the tour dates so people have a little bit of a glimpse of what they may be able to look forward to?
I think I don't want to say anything set in stone yet, but it's looking like Salt Lake City and Chicago, which are my two bookends. So it's my start date and my end date. Already look like they're going to have cover bands to play the first night of the tour and the last night of the tour, which is going to be really pretty awesome. Great way to kick it off and great way to close it.
One thing that's very awesome is you have this incredible artwork. You got to talk a little bit about that because it's very cool and it's very Dead-like.
The artwork?
Yeah, on your website.
Did you say? Oh, right. That is the brilliant Anthony Tominelli. He's New York artist, and a very good friend of mine. And I had, I was putting this together, and two of my closest and oldest friends are Anthony and his wife, Nikki, and they've helped me from the very beginning. And I said, I'm putting this website together, and I think I want it to have sort of a Dead feel, but I don't want it to be so stuck on the Grateful Dead because it should sort of be a living and breathing thing. I kind of want it to have its own identity. And I asked him to do some sketches for me, and this is what he came up with, and they couldn't be more perfect. It sort of has given a whole identity and a whole brand to the project. It's terrific.
Now, when you talk about the project, the project's going to culminate probably into multimedia things beyond just the book, but I'm sure you're going to have static pictures, videos, book, ebook. We only have a couple of minutes in this segment, but could you just introduce us to what you hope to see as a line of things that will result from all of these great experiences?
I think if I could wish right now how all of this would end, it would just be a published book with a lot of multimedia film clips to support it. And whether those clips live on independently through other media outlets, that would be great, or whether they are part of an add-on to a book, sort of a digital add-on to a book, that would be great as well. But my one philosophy about this project is to do it in the same vein as the Grateful Dead would have done it. So to have somewhat of a plan, but to be as open as humanly possible to that plan changing or to things coming up along the way that I wouldn't have expected, and to be very open to opportunities. So it's really my goal to collect as much as I can, to enjoy as many stories as I can, and to document what I can, and then be very open to where that might lead.
Well, in many ways, you're creating almost like the third generation archive of Grateful Dead material, because I guess the original archives are like from the 60s to the 90s, and then there was the sort of when the Grateful Dead started doing a little bit more things like dead.net and things, and then their ultimate, having their own channel on the satellite radio, for example, on Sirius XM. So it's kind of cool. Wow. We're going to leave it in 1 minute, but I have to on the other side of this, we'll squeeze in a great story about Paul Solomon and Europe 72. Speaking of the Grateful Dead and their tour. This is Richard Solomon, Paul Solomon, and Robert Grayson, your three co-hosts, because this show is so robust that you need three co-hosts to talk to Joanna Colangelo, who is the Endless Tour Project coordinator and guru and creator. And check her out at endlesstourproject.com. We will be right back. Keep it locked in on Taking Care of Business, TCBRadio.com. Welcome back to Taking Care of Business. This is Richard Solomon, Paul Solomon, Robert Grayson, your co-host with our very special guest, Joanna Colangelo, who hails originally from New York. And we are talking to her about what she's going to be doing in 2014. If you happen to be listening to this in the future, then she's already done it, and it was way cool. And you just have to catch either her book or her blog or whatever to catch it. Just a quick note. I always like to share this because it's a really touching story, at least to me. My brother and I are very, very close, and we're best friends. And I remember one thing that my brother did that was very, very cool was he worked at the SUNY Binghamton Record Co-op, because there actually was a record co-op at the school.
Known as Slip Disc Records, in the basement of the student union, which no longer exists. And we were paid in records. So we had to work so many hours to get a record. So I had to work, since the Europe 72 was a triple album, I had to work so many hours to get a triple album, which was Europe 72.
All right, cool. And so that was a great gift. I just want to, our levels need to be a little lower for some reason.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, if people want to get in touch with Joanna either before or during the tour, how do they get in touch with you? I mean, we have the magic of radio, but how do people get in touch with you? And by the way, we're monopolizing all your time, so I can't imagine how much time you can devote to all the people. I know that you need to talk to a lot of people, and probably some of it's better if you do it sort of beforehand. But how are you going to manage that, and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So the best way for folks to get in touch is through the website. There's a page called Join the Tour, and that's just, there's a very short form just to collect a little bit of information about who you are, what shows you went to, where you're located today, just so I could kind of put that into place. And that's it. I'll get in touch with you pretty shortly after that. And then once I hit the road, that's when, we'll just coordinate a time and place to meet up, and I can hear your story and get to know you a little bit. But really, the website is the way to go, and I'm very accessible. You can send me an email. You can find us on Facebook. But I do like to collect a little bit of info just so I get to know you before I sit down with you.
Now, will you also be collecting photographs from people as well?
Yeah, I think, and everyone has something different that they are sharing and want to share. Some folks actually were interviewed by local news crews when they were at a show in Utah, and they still have that footage. Other people actually have the reels that they recorded. They were in the taper section, and so they still have that. So I think, each stop on the tour may be a little bit different from the one before it, just really based on the folks who are there. And like I mentioned, if you're not in one of those actual cities, there's a really good chance that I'll wind up coming to see you anyway, because I'm going to be crisscrossing that country 3 times, and I will probably be driving different routes every time. So, if you're living in Louisiana or Oklahoma or someplace where the tour didn't hit, really good chance that I'll be coming through and driving through that state anyway. I would love to meet up.
Robert, you had a question.
Are you musical? Do you play an instrument or sing?
Oh, I wish.
I mean, the idea is such a creative thing. I was just imagining that you had other things that you did.
I don't. I've tried to play so many instruments. I can say this, I play a lot of instruments really badly. But I've started playing piano when I was a really very, very young, probably 6 or 7 years old. And then I moved on to guitar, and then clarinet, and then trombone. And finally, when I got to college, I found the one instrument that I think I had any kind of natural talent for. And it's still small, but it was any kind of natural talent. And that was actually the drums. I was in a Levon Helm phase.
Oh, wow.
That was it.
Yeah. And I'm a drummer as well, so there you go.
Oh, I wrote my undergraduate thesis on the band. I knew Levon for not so well, but I knew him a little bit before he passed away. He was incredible.
I would love to read that thesis. I remember seeing in 1978 going to the Ziegfeld Theater and actually seeing The Last Waltz at a movie theater. I remember that.
Yeah.
And speaking of music, Paul's a violinist, and to honor him in his violin pursuit, he's been playing since he was 4 years old. I remember buying for him the Blues for Allah T-shirt,
and I proudly wore it in orchestra recently at the Forest Hill Symphony Orchestra.
And then, so maybe what we got to do is got to get a picture of Paul with his T-shirt, and I'll either wear the Chinese New Year or the Mardi Gras shirt, and we'll take a picture of ourselves in front of the station logo, and we'll put that on our website to commemorate this radio show with Joanna. So this is really cool. Now, how is your family going to visit you, or I'm sure there's a lot of people who are taking great interest. Like, for example, how did you end up on Tales from the Golden Road? How did they find out about you?
Well,
or did you seek them out?
Story.
We got time. This is non-commercial radio.
There's a music journalist out in L.A. Named Michael Simmons, who's a very good friend of mine and sort of a mentor of mine in the writing world. And he read something I wrote a couple of years ago about Al Cooper, actually. And we wound up striking up a friendship. He's sort of a veteran music writer, L.A. Times, Rolling Stone, Mojo. And he really, really took me under his wing and has been just an incredible support. And so when this whole project came together, he, was very generous, I'll say, with some of the folks who he knew. And, of course, David Gans, he was one of them. And I got to know David a little bit, and that's how Tales from the Golden Road happened.
Well, because by the way, when I heard you were a great guest, and I thought they covered the topic really, really well. And that's what inspired me. So kind of to loop back to what we were talking about before, sometimes some of our research is just listening to people on the radio going, oh, wow, we need them for us. Because like Joanna, we're kind of like a small army. You know how the United States Army has the motto, an army of one? Well, that's kind of like what we are at Taking Care of Business. We're an army of one, truly. In fact, when we're late to the studio, the show runs late. So when you were listening to all the Grateful Dead music, you said that one of the first two albums that you purchased was Shakedown Street. I loved what I loved about that album was the album cover, where you actually see all these people being shaken down, and the guy who drew it was it
Gilbert Stewart? From the Freak Brothers.
The guy, yeah, he was the guy that did the Freak Brothers comics, and I remember there was a comic book store in Binghamton where Paul and I both went to college, but not at the same exact time.
Fat Cat
Books. And I remember getting the Fabulous Freak Brothers, and I remember the artwork from Shakedown Street. That's why I got interested in the comics. But that's sort of lost also, the whole album cover art thing. When you saw... Did you ever collect tapes? Did you ever collect bootlegs of any of the concerts?
Not until I was a little older, I think, I actually am probably in the rare category of I really did come to the Grateful Dead on their studio albums. And I, maybe part of that was that I was so young at the time. But it's sort of interesting that the first two albums I got were American Beauty and Shakedown Street, because they are very different albums. But it was also like a really wonderful introduction, because it kind of gave me right up front the span of the music that I was going to experience, as I sort of delved deeper into their catalog. And I will say that the album, I love that you talked about the cover of Shakedown Street, because I used to stare at that and just imagine what it was like to be one of those people. I mean, it was such a cool cover. And then, of course, American Beauty was beautiful in its own way. But I think it all, it's very hard to remove the artwork from the Grateful Dead, too. I think maybe more so than any other band, they are so tied to the visual of the Grateful Dead brand. Certainly as much as the music and the values and the philosophy and the vibe and all that, the artwork of the Dead, my goodness, could be in museums. Beautiful.
I'm actually on the internet now, because even though Paul and I actually kept our vinyl records,
yes,
believe it or not, we actually have some 8-track tapes in the office that still work, and in a working 8-track player. We're looking at it on the internet right now, and it's kind of a wild album the way it is, with there's people in cars, motorcycles, and I remember talking to Jeff Madsen of Dark Star Orchestra about Shakedown Street as well. You can catch that interview on YouTube, by the way, for all the DSO fans out there. Jeff was incredible, gave us 2 hours in the studio, and was just very gracious with his time. And part of our content on the show has actually been to provide a lot of Grateful Dead related material, including the show that we did with Robert Grayson. Let's plug that for 1 second, which was, Robert, you followed further in 2013, and you did some videotapes.
I had the same passion that Joanna had, to just bite off a larger chunk of what they were communicating, and it was an amazing way to see America, as she said, a pilgrimage.
What cities did you catch further in this year? Because as people may now know, Further is taking a hiatus in 2014. I think their last shows are going to be in Mexico in January, and then that's it for, quote, a while. And I know that Phil has basically said that he doesn't want to be on the road so much. He'd rather kind of be in one place and play music than be on the road a lot. But what cities did you hit them in this year, in 2013?
We saw them in Denver at Red Rocks, which was a place I always wanted to shoot a show at. Highly recommend it. In Washington, in Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, and then San Francisco, Las Vegas, and L.A.
And we talked about this on our radio show on that topic, but just for the people listening here, did you chronicle that event?
I did. I took a lot of footage. There was a number of different layers of the story, similar to what Joanna was saying. And there was the travel, there was the scenery, there was the community, the instant, brother sisterhood. It was, and I did get to shoot some footage of the shows as well. So, a lot of great moments captured. So looking forward to trying to piece that together.
So in many ways, the two of you are doing things that kind of dovetailed each other. Robert doing the Further tour, Joanna kind of going in the time machine and retracing the Dead. It would be kind of interesting to actually follow Joanna, for all of us out there who may not be able to go on the tour with her, because in many ways that will be our way of vicariously following the Dead in '95 by following Joanna. So in many ways, I'm going to be following Joanna just to sort of recapture a part of my youth that I thought was very important, which was going to shows and sort of the whole community and hanging out and listening to the music and, talking to people about different shows. And, I'll never forget some of the culture of the Grateful Dead community. I remember I was talking to Mary Bigger, and I've talked about this before on and off the radio. And I remember I said to her something like, they just leave. They don't like say goodbye or anything. And she just looked at me like, well, because they expect you to be here tomorrow. And she was really right about that. It's like, you were at Madison Square Garden. They would play for like 6 nights, and they expect you to be there for more than one day. and in many ways, it made sense because they didn't really try to play the same music, repetitiously. And it certainly wasn't like what you see the modern band where they have the set list. It's the same 16 songs in the same order with the same band introductions at the same point with the same break. And it's almost like just seeing a replay button of a video over and over again. They really tried to mix it up and be a little different each show. And
So even something more fundamental, the Grateful Dead is the only band that I've ever seen that actually tuned.
Yeah, I talked about it in a second. So talk about that.
It's like when Richie took me to my first concert, which was at the Nassau Coliseum, the Grateful Dead spent 20 minutes tuning. And I've seen many bands who I will not mention who played out of tune and didn't seem to care or notice, especially a recent band I saw at Jones Beach.
Not only that, but I noticed a lot of times Paul would tell me when we go to a concert, he goes, wow, these people are rushing it.
Yeah.
Like they'd be just rushing right through the show. Like, let's get this over and get on the bus, And that's certainly...
And the other interesting thing that I noticed was that having gone to, more recent rock concerts, there's always a roadie running back and forth, giving guitars. In between every song, there's a new guitar, and they're picking up a new guitar. And Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir and Phil Lesh, they never changed. They got out there, they had their instruments, and they played. And when they needed to tune it, they would tune their instruments, and then they'd go on. But you never saw people sort of running out in between songs and getting them what they needed. I kind of forgot about that. It only dawned on me when I was watching, some live shows of theirs, having just come from some more, newer shows, newer live concerts, and I thought, oh my God, they never took their guitars off.
Wow. We are basically done here. We have like 1 minute left. One thing, backstory, Jerry had a couple different guitars that had different names, and there was litigation about that and who to get it, and Jeff Matz and I talked about that. Wow, that was an incredibly fast show. For those who missed this show, you got to hit the rewind button. Catch us on YouTube. This was great. We had Joanna Colangelo on with us. It's the Endless Tour Project, endlesstourproject.com. And catch her. She's going to be doing the Grateful Dead tour of 1995 and 2014. And you need to check her out, check out her website, get in touch with her, share her stories from the road. We're out of time. Joanna, thank you. We'll see you
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Robert, we'll be talking to you soon, as we always do. And Paul, thank you very much for being a part of my life in general and on the radio as well. We'll be seeing you next week. Thanks for listening.